Our lives are filled with distraction, filled with stimulation. But imagine if there was a way to slow things down, for the mind to unwind and for our body to let go of that stress. When was the last time that you stopped, that you were still, that you put down your phone, that you got rid of all the distractions around you? When was the last time that you did nothing? And by nothing, I really mean nothing. As I got a little bit older, I experienced some loss in my life. People really close to me. And I didn't know how to deal with that. So I found myself overwhelmed by emotion. I found that my mind was often very busy. And I thought at some level that I could think my way out of it. As it turned out, I couldn't. I needed something more radical. So I decided to quit my degree and become a Buddhist monk instead. Imagine that you're sitting on the side of the road. He said, now all you have to do is to just sit there and watch the cars. The cars are your thoughts. Sounds easy, right? But what usually happens is that we feel a bit unsettled by the movement of the traffic. So we run out into the road and we try and stop the cars. Or maybe we even find ourselves chasing after a few, forgetting that the idea was to just sit there. Now obviously all of this running around only adds to the feeling of restlessness in our mind. So training the mind is about changing our relationship with those passing thoughts and feelings. Learning how to view them with a little more perspective, and when we do this, we naturally find a place of calm. Will we sometimes forget the idea of the exercise and become distracted? Of course we will. But as soon as we remember, here we are, back on the side of the road again, just watching the traffic go by, perfectly at ease in both body and mind. One of the fundamental techniques for cultivating that place of calm is called focused attention. When we're training the mind, having something to focus our attention on is really important. It could be a visualization, a question, a word, a phrase, or maybe even something external. The most common thing to focus on is the breath. Having that place of focused attention, that gives us an anchor. It's something to come back to when we suddenly realize that the mind's wandered off, which of course it inevitably will do at times. And when we focus on an object like the breath, it's not that we're trying to escape thoughts or shut out the world around us. We're learning to recognize when we've got caught up in that thinking or in any type of distraction, and to gently step out of it, to let it go, and to return to that place of calm, focused attention. Meditation. And we know now that when we sit to meditate, in the same way as when we go and work out in the gym, we train a muscle, it gets thicker and stronger. In the same way, that part of the brain that's responsible for a feeling of happiness and well-being, that's receiving more blood flow. It's getting thicker, it's getting stronger, so we actually spend more time in that place. Meditation's been proven to reduce stress, frustration, depression, and pain, and also to increase happiness, heightening levels of patience, acceptance, and compassion. So even when you're sitting there and it feels like nothing's happening, you can feel confident that meditation and mindfulness can make a change in our life. The best way of experiencing meditation is to actually do it, not to just talk about it. And remember, some days meditation is going to feel easy. On other days, it might feel difficult. The trick is to gently stay with it each time, no matter how it feels. The most important thing is that you set yourself up in a place that you're going to be comfortable. Now you can do this sitting up or lying down. You definitely don't have to be sitting cross-legged on the floor. What's that one thing that you're holding on to in your life? Maybe it's a conversation, an argument, you have with another person. Maybe it's a sense of longing for another person, or a sense of frustration with something that's happening in your life right now. Maybe it's even a physical thing that you've become attached to over time. It's so easy to hold on to things, and as a result, we feel heavy. We feel weighed down, like we're carrying baggage in our life. Today, we're going to explore letting go. With the very best teachers in the world close by, I still experience the mind that was sort of ticking away in the background. And for most of us, right, our minds are quite busy most of the time. Almost like a little sort of monkey jumping around, never really stopping, never taking the time to rest. And I think because of that, we tend to feel quite tired. We often feel overwhelmed. We don't necessarily know how to experience a sense of rest and relaxation. So what we usually do in that situation is to try and think our way out of the problem. So we're essentially using the monkey to try and control the monkey. And so we need to find a way of letting go, not only by creating the conditions around us in life that are conducive to relaxation, but also internally, understanding how we can find relaxation in the mind. What we need to do is to create an environment where we can naturally let go. He said, imagine the blue sky. He said, the blue sky is your mind. Now, this blue sky always exists. Sure, there are days when the sky is very cloudy, and clouds being our thoughts, we may not necessarily see the blue sky. In fact, we may go through long periods in our life when there are so many clouds in the sky that we forget what the blue sky even looks like. Now, in this particular technique, we're going to imagine a warm flow of light coming down through the top of the head and into the body. And as we're doing that, we might think to ourselves, okay, I've really got to get this right. I've really got to make it clear in my mind. And we start trying to imagine. We essentially overthink the exercise. We worry, should the light be small? Should it be big? Should it be round? Should it be square? We kind of get in our own way. So with this particular exercise, we're going to take a slightly different approach. In fact, take a moment right now to imagine a place that you really enjoy. So just picture that place in your mind. Might be the colors, the shapes, maybe it's the sounds, the smells. So my guess is that right now that image naturally comes to mind. You just see it, right? And it may even remain in the mind for a few seconds without any real effort to try and keep it there. So it's this gentle, relaxed approach that works really well for visualization. So remember, it doesn't require any great effort. So focus less on the clarity of the image and more on the feeling that it brings to the meditation. And in time, that image will naturally become clearer. Helps show how after just 8 weeks of meditation training, we can actually bring about physical changes to the areas of the brain associated with learning and memory in size. And the part that's associated with anxiety and stress actually grew smaller. Now, obviously, if we don't continue to practice, we won't necessarily continue to experience those benefits. And then my final bit of advice is always, before you get up, just remind yourself as an intention to take this quality of mind with you into your life. It's great to take some time out, to close our eyes, to be still, to be quiet. And there are real benefits to that. But I feel like the real benefits of meditation are found when we take that quality of mind into our everyday life, into our relationships, into our experience. So always putting in that intention before you get up and move. Who or what do you appreciate most in your life right now? So much of our life is spent wanting to be somewhere else, perhaps to be doing something else, or maybe even to be with someone else, that we miss what's going on in this moment right now. There's a lot to think about. Our work, our families, hopes, dreams, fears. We forget that pausing is really a way to appreciate the preciousness of human life. You know, when you directly experience that feeling of what it means to be alive. You feel genuinely grateful, if only for a moment. These are the things that we can so easily take for granted when we're caught up in our everyday life. Always chasing after the future, always looking back to the past, and not appreciating that a mind that may admittedly be troublesome at times has the potential to be both happy and healthy. I asked him a question, and that was, who or what do you appreciate most in your life right now? And at the end of the exercise, he looked sort of visibly moved and yet a little uncomfortable. Look, my life I'm very fortunate. You know, I have a business, I have a wonderful family, I have beautiful young children. I have so many good things in my life, but when I asked myself that question, the thing that came up in my mind was my morning cup of coffee. It was a moment of quiet, of stillness. You know, he talked about how the coffee smelt, the ritual of making it. There was something sort of deeply peaceful about that moment. It was almost like a meditation in itself. And the truth is, we all have these moments throughout the day, opportunities where we can truly be more present to feel a greater sense of appreciation in our life. You're encouraged first thing in the morning, rather than jumping out of bed, to sit up in bed and to take 20, 30 seconds just to pause and be grateful that you have woken up in the morning. Before every meal in the day, to pause just for 10, 20, 30 seconds, just to consider where the food's come from and to be grateful that it's sitting in front of you. When you're with someone else, rather than thinking about what's going on in your own life, actually being present with that other person, appreciating time with that other person. As long as we know where they are and how to look after them, then life starts to look and feel very different very quickly. Intention of the reflection technique is to encourage a quiet, clear space in the mind into which we can then drop a question. It's not about trying to answer the question. Instead, we just want to observe what's happening when we drop that question in. Curious to see what bubbles up to the surface. Whether that's a thought, a feeling, or even a physical sensation. Sometimes the result may seem related to the question. At other times, not at all. That's why it's good to frame the question in the second person and to ask, what do you think? Instead of, what do I think? The mind's a little more open, naturally curious. And hey, maybe we just sit there and laugh. There's no right or wrong answer. It's about learning to listen to the mind, to be curious, to be interested. To understand that it's about the journey rather than the destination. The intention is to create an environment where we touch the emotion rather than just touch the thought, ensuring that we're actually grateful for life to the extent that it becomes precious and positive while we're alive. They ask participants at the end of each day just to consider 3 things in their lives that they're grateful for. And in writing those things down, in reflecting on those positive things, they've essentially discovered that taking the time to do this on a regular basis not only helps people feel better in the moment, but also allows them to feel happier in their everyday life. So the results of this study essentially mean that if we can find a way of introducing that greater sense of gratitude at any time in our day, it can significantly improve happiness and help us learn to fall in love with life again. What do you tend to do when you get overwhelmed? What do you do when your mind is spinning out of control? Who was handing out the usual rice and curried vegetables? And the ice cream was being pushed to the middle of the table, making it very clear that the curry and the rice was to be eaten before the ice cream. Now, in this particular monastery, you had to take about an hour to eat the food, so you're eating incredibly slowly. And obviously that meant that the ice cream was just going to sit there. So in my mind, I went from a place of real, genuine excitement, I hadn't seen ice cream for a long time, to feeling a little bit confused, a little bit frustrated, and quite anxious as I sat and watched the ice cream melt in the summer sunshine, until eventually there was just a feeling of ill will in my mind, where you could look at the story and say, well, that's fine, it's just ice cream. But you could replace the ice cream in that story with anything. So I'd like to introduce you to a meditation technique called noting. Now, it's especially helpful if you feel like you're constantly getting caught up and distracted by thoughts, especially those thoughts of stress and anxiety. In that moment, we pause and identify the nature of distraction. Oh yeah, thinking, or oh yeah, feeling. Having noted that, there's a sense of having almost dealt with it. And this makes it easier to let go of the distraction and gently return to the object of focus. And when it happens again, which it will, we simply apply that same approach, gently noting the nature of the distraction. Now, when we begin noting, the temptation is to try and catch every single thought and feeling. But that's unnecessary, and it quickly becomes tiring. We only need to note the distraction when we realize that we've been lost in thought. And even then, it's a very gentle acknowledgement. One group practiced meditation using a noting technique like the one that we're using today. The others either practiced a different meditation or engaged in stress management techniques, like breathing exercises, but without the noting technique. And then all of them were subjected to intentionally stressful situations. Those who used the noting technique showed reduced stress response, reduced stress hormone levels, and even lower blood pressure responses compared to the other groups. So it's not just about training to be more present, it's about changing the way we relate to our experiences, changing our perspective, being less judgmental, less critical of ourselves and those around us, and when we do that, we feel less stressed. Do you ever experience thoughts that make you feel bad about yourself? Do you ever find that you're giving yourself a hard time or having feelings of self-doubt? In this episode, we're going to explore judgment, the judging mind, resentment towards oneself and towards others. A few years back, a lady wrote in telling me about her experience as a young woman in her late 20s, newly married and finding out that her husband had had an affair. They separated, they eventually divorced, and she was describing to me how she had gone through the next 40 years of her life, holding on to this feeling of resentment. She'd come to meditation in her early 70s, and soon after, she started to see a change in this conversation. It's not that it stopped all of a sudden, and it's not that she didn't feel resentful, but over a period of time, it started to change. In over 40 years, she realized that she'd gone a whole day without thinking about her ex-husband. The mind is constantly judging, comparing, being critical about ourselves and about others. And because of that, we're caught up in this tension between how things actually are in this moment and how we think they should be, how we'd like them to be. We're constantly engaged in this kind of inner chatter, beating ourselves up or constantly blaming others. So our technique for today is called loving kindness, visualizing different people in different scenarios. Sometimes it's someone that we know. Sometimes it's someone that we don't know. Sometimes it's people we like, and sometimes it's people we don't like. And we're focusing on this person being happy. It may sound easy, but it requires a little bit of practice, especially when we're focusing on someone that we're really mad at. But this is about cultivating love and kindness in our own mind. And in that process of focusing more on the happiness of others, we're actually letting go of many of the things that cause unhappiness in our own mind. What they discovered was that participants overwhelmingly developed a more accepting image of their bodies. They also reported that it lessened the constant stream of negative thoughts, helping them to relate to themselves with greater sense of tenderness and kindness. Have you ever felt so much discomfort that you just don't know what to do with yourself? A physical pain that you can't stop thinking about. It gets to the point where it seems to occupy the mind all of the time. In today's episode, we're going to explore how meditation can be used to help manage pain, and how the approach of meditation can be used to change our relationship with pain and discomfort. And for one individual, for one guy on this retreat, he was really having a tough time. He had experienced chronic back pain for so many years. He tried medication, he tried lots of different approaches, and he really believed that meditation could help him. The challenge had been that he felt completely unable to sit still and upright. So we set up a place for him where he could actually lie down. Things changed for him, not just physically, but also mentally. He acknowledged that so much of the pain sort of cycle was both in his mind and also in his body. And as he became more comfortable in his mind, he felt less tension in his body, to the point where midweek he even felt brave enough to sort of prop himself up a little bit. And by the end of the week, he was sat fully upright on the floor. But over the course of a week, he'd found a way to relate to the pain in a different way. He was no longer lost in the cycle of thought around the pain. Instead, he was able to sit and observe it from a distance. So when we experience pain in our life, it's very easy to feel isolated, to feel like in that moment, the whole world is carrying on without us, or as though we're the only person that really feels like that in that moment. And of course, this doesn't negate the pain that we feel, but it's actually really helpful in those moments to just reflect on the fact that in that moment, there will be tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people around the world, perhaps feeling something similar. And in recognizing that, in acknowledging that, we feel less isolated. There is a sense that it's not my pain and your pain, it's our pain. In the same way that it's not my happiness and your happiness, it's our happiness. No longer applying a lot of resistance to it, so we just build up more stress in the mind. And at times, we may even observe a complete shift in the nature of pain itself. So there's the physical sensation. That's the tingling, the burning feeling perhaps. And then there's the other. Oh, I don't like this. Make it stop. Why me? Response. So mindfulness lets us pay attention to the present tense sensory experience, and in a non-judgmental way. So with a non-meditator, the judging, controlling part of the brain becomes active, whereas the sensory part shuts down. But with a mindful subject, the sensory part of the brain becomes active, whereas the judging part turns off. So these scans show us that with mindfulness, it's possible to be present with our pain, but without the suffering that makes it feel unbearable. I'd like to introduce you to a meditation technique called the body scan. Now, the body scan is a great technique to use at any time in life, but it's particularly helpful when you're experiencing some kind of pain or discomfort in the body. As you scan downward, starting at the top of the head and finishing down at the toes, we're simply moving down, becoming more aware about how the body feels, and essentially building up a picture. And we're going to notice areas of comfort, areas of discomfort, areas of pain, and areas of real kind of ease and relaxation. It's not about trying to change the feeling or to resist the discomfort, but instead just to get comfortable with it. And as much as possible, try to remain curious and interested. I know that sounds difficult when you have pain and discomfort. The last thing you want to apply is curiosity to it. But the more we do that, the lighter the technique feels. The more we create space in the mind between witnessing the discomfort and the discomfort itself. So this is a very, very gentle focus. Doesn't require a lot of work. This is the one time in the day where you can truly let go of any effort.